All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast and This Week in the News. My name is Jared Bauman. Always a good time when we're talking about Reddit, Google, and their convenient marriage, as it were. Today we have a story that kind of won't go away. It's all about how Reddit just, I guess we'll say, can't seem to thrive without Google along their side. In other news, several Googlers that we are all very familiar with were speaking at an event last week. They had some interesting things to say about scaled content. So we'll dive deep into that story. And last, a popular journalist, Ed Zitron, is back at it, this time addressing AI and what he calls its phony optimism. I'm sure Thomas will have some things to say about that one. Of course, side hustles and weird niches. Thomas is back joining me today. I have to say, Thomas, you're back to a very weird site, a very weird niche site that is just the kind that I would expect from you.
I consider this one almost an update on one that I shared a long while ago, because it's almost like the business model has evolved to this point. So this is gonna be a really interesting one. Yeah, and it is weird.
See what you have to say. I consider you a quasi expert in this space, and yes, it's kind of weird, but we'll get to that, of course. Let's go ahead and dive into our first story. And like I teased at the outset, Reddit is this is kind of an update, kind of borrowing your language that you just used, Thomas. This is kind of an update of a story that we have presented about before. And it's this fact that Reddit is tied to Google, and they are tied together because Reddit and Google have a deal, right? They have a deal where Google licenses Reddit's content. But beyond that, Reddit IPO'd last year, and their stock price has surged quite a bit in relation to kind of their traffic increases that Google has been giving them. So basically, let me just kind of give you the cliff notes of this story here. Since going public, Reddit, they've experienced this significant growth, but analysts have been warning that it's reliant on Google traffic and that could limit their long-term value. I think it was Redburn Atlantic analysts were the ones that were quoted here, stating that much of their growth is driven by logged out users. That's a term we've heard used before. And logged out users mostly come through Google search. These users are less engaged. They typically use a platform to find some quick answer rather than participating actively. And that's not really the way the Reddit platform thrives. When you compare that up against Reddit's logged in user growth, while Reddit's logged in user growth is strong, the growth in logged out users, which is up 51%, is the one that they're concerned about because they just don't monetize as well. They don't stay on the platform as well. So there's a couple more threads to this story. But I mean, Thomas, this is one we've covered before, but it's kind of getting updated too in light of what's going on with Reddit, their stock price, and their volatility of late.
The biggest update here to me is just how much this impacts the value of Reddit as a company. Because now that they're public, we can see by their share price what people think the company is worth. And if you look at the chart, it's pretty much as volatile as, one of our traffic graphs from Google, basically.
Hey,
so
you
look back to November.
Be careful.
What was it? If you look back at last year, around November, they were around $80 a share or something like that. Then as their traffic from Google increased, they kind of skyrocketed. I'm sure there's other factors at play here, but by February, they were up around $220 a share from what I'm seeing on here. And then they've dropped now back down pretty substantially to, as we're recording this, somewhere closer to like 97, something like that. So it has been a wild ride. It has been a volatile type of movement there. And I think we've all seen in this industry and pointed out, hey, it seems like they're getting tons of Google traffic. Is this sustainable? How might this change in the future? It's really interesting to see people outside of our space noticing that trend too, coming at it from a little bit of a different angle, looking at their user base and saying, how engaged are their customers really? Well, if they're coming from Google, it's more transactional. They're not real customers of Reddit. And it starting to actually downgrade and say, okay, it's not as valuable as a company. You shouldn't buy the stock, based on the fluctuations that are happening in their Google traffic.
It's interesting because there's so many different ways to look at it, and it all kind of comes back to the same general premise that you just outlined. Like, the Google traffic brings users that don't act the same way as, quote, logged in Reddit users, which for the to kind of shorten that, like that's the true Reddit user pre-IPO, right? Like pre-IPO, pre all this love from Google, Reddit users were very unique, right? We talk about them like they're Reddit users, like they have a persona, they have a profile. And the traffic that Google is sending, yes, it's going to Reddit, but they're not engaging at the same level. And so this is kind of causing this seesaw effect, if you will. Here's a quote out of the article. Cordwell and Barker added, and I don't remember who these people are, but the quote's the good part. Cordwell and Barker added that there is, quote, clear evidence that the boost to traffic from Reddit's recent changes is hitting a ceiling, with a risk that what Google giveth, it will taketh away, according to Bloomberg. Then Jen Wong, Reddit's COO, recently described the relationship they have with Google as symbiotic. Quote, people are using Google to get to Reddit, she said at the Morgan Stanley Technology, Media, and Telecom Conference just recently in March. When I view it like this, I don't view it as existential. We have these two sources of traffic. It's not existential for us, but it is some chop that we managed through. So, I mean, it's interesting because obviously, Reddit has come and taken a lot of our traffic, and it's odd because it doesn't necessarily seem, if you look at the stock price and other things, like it's the kind of traffic that Reddit really wants anyways.
What I love about the story is that it's so relatable to people in our space, right? Like the idea that your business can rise and fall on the whims of Google and its algorithms. We've all lived that. We all know that on some intuitive level. But to see that really laid out by a Wall Street analyst who's probably not, well-versed in SEO or anything, they're just looking at it and going, well, this isn't sustainable. This isn't good. And I think it also captures, at this point, for a lot of people in our community, when you get more Google traffic, it's almost bittersweet, or, you don't trust it. It's like, okay, it's great I'm getting this now, but I know this is going to tempt me to create more SEO content or pivot my business model back towards that. And I've seen how that ends. So I can see why, for somebody looking at Reddit from the outside, like these analysts, they're kind of running the same calculus. It's like, okay, it's nice that they got all this traffic from Google, but are they too reliant on it? Yeah. And if that is the case, is it actually a weaker business than if they hadn't got all that traffic in the first place? And, if they diversified their traffic sources, and I feel that same way. When I see a spike in Google traffic, I'm now like, oh, okay, all right, it's fine, but is it going to last? Can I believe in it? Should I do anything differently as a result of it? And the answer is typically no.
I mean, I've interviewed a number of, kind of people from brokerage accounts, places the businesses that sell, businesses and broker those. And one of the things that consistently comes out is the diversity in traffic sources, in lead sources, in revenue sources. Like, this is one of the most important things for people buying businesses. And it's almost like, to your point, like Google or Reddit has a reliance on Google, and that is not boding well for them in terms of their business and whatnot. And to be fair and almost close out the story, I will read one part that is to Reddit's credit. We like to look at that 51% growth that was quoted from Google traffic or from non-logged in users. But to be fair, Reddit's daily active users who are logged into their accounts were up 27% or more last year. I don't know how it can be 27% or more. It's either 27% or it's more than 20. Anyways, I digress. But so they are growing. They're just growing at a much more rapid clip from this logged out traffic that tends to come from Google. And it's creating some trepidation, which is very reflective in their stock price. Okay, let's move on. We'll continue to just watch the Reddit saga play out, especially as it relates to their inextricable tie, as the article said, to Google. But let's move on to more Google conversation here. And this is a topic that is on scaled content. And I'll pull the story up here. This is in Search Engine Journal. The title is Google on Scaled Content, quote, it's going to be an issue. That is according to Google's Danny Sullivan, who cautions that you should think carefully if you are undertaking mass content generation. So, both John Mueller and Danny Sullivan have raised these issues in the past about AI-generated content, particularly when it's used for mass content generation. They were recently at a somewhere in New York, some sort of gathering. And let's see here. Basically, this story highlights around the newly updated Quality Rater guidelines, which now specifically addresses AI generated content, warning that such content can be rated as lowest quality if it is unoriginal or added with little value. And then Danny Sullivan went on to compare AI generated content to past scaled content practices, which Google has historically flagged as spam. He also stressed that the content's quality and motivation should not be solely about generating search traffic, which we've heard before. And so I guess from a high level, and we can kind of get into some of the specifics here, but the key takeaway is that Google is concerned about mass-produced content, especially when it lacks any originality, doesn't really offer value. And so it kind of feels like a shot across the bow or a warning sign about a continued focus on this from Google. The update to the QRG or the Quality Rater Guidelines also has some significance. I kind of just summarize this. I won't read it out, but you kind of get the picture. Thomas, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, this is a topic that has been, brought up many times in the past and is probably not going to go away anytime soon.
I think I've been screaming about this, for a while now. Like, this is the year that Google is going to crack down on the scaled content. And I know they say you can make it in multiple ways. I think they're kind of saying it's probably 80% AI at this point, and maybe 20% people doing kind of low value programmatic SEO stuff. But I think this is the year that they're going to have to really crack down on it, because again, what's the value of that content to them? I think some of it can be very valuable to users, frankly, in some cases. But what's the value to Google of having the SERPs filled with that content when they can make it themselves with AI Overview and now the AI mode? Why should they be surfacing it? I think they have a business case for surfacing unique content from creators, original blog posts, recipes, that kind of stuff, really interesting articles, original photos, the kind of stuff that they're not going to be able to get from AI there. But if they're already creating their own AI responses, why on earth should they send traffic to other people's AI responses that are just sort of pasted into a blog post? So I think they didn't have the technical capability to elevate the original stuff and to kind of downgrade the AI stuff. I think they're getting closer to having that now. And to me, it's very much tied into the Reddit story, because what we see with Google is when they don't have the capability to do something yet, they lean on kind of a stopgap measure. And to me, the elevation of Reddit was a way of saying, we don't know how to find good UGC content, good opinions from real people, but we know there's a lot of it on Reddit. So in the meanwhile, while we work on that problem, let's just put that there. And Reddit will be our stand-in for UGC and original person-created content. For the time being. I think Reddit is right, and their analysts are right to say, hey, that's probably not going to last, because it seems like now Google is really trying to lean into it. The idea of basically elevating original content and having AI on the one hand, their own AI, and anything that's not AI is going to be video. It's going to be original blog posts, original photos, original recipes. It's not going to be the AI created stuff that people stick on their blog and maybe they tweak it a little bit and publish it. So I think they're probably close to having the technical capabilities to weed that stuff out. And it wouldn't surprise me at all, given that they're starting to hint about it publicly. Another thing they love to do before they do something big is to hint about it publicly. I think that really indicates that we're going to see some movement on that. It wasn't in the March update to a large extent. It was in very targeted places. Again, Google loves to do that, right? Manually maybe pick out some stuff before a big update comes that wipes out the whole category. So to me, all signs are pointing to some kind of big crackdown on this content, maybe later this year.
If you, I'll read his quotes, and again, they're paraphrased quotes in the article from the person who was at the event. I feel like I can hear Danny coming through. I'm having heard Danny interviewed a number of times, but I'll read a couple of them, and then I want to give one example that Danny used that he thought was helpful, where AI is helpful. So some quotes here. Let's see. Well, what are you going to do about AI? How are you going to deal with the AI explosion? AI can generate thousands of pages. These are all questions that are being surfaced to him, and he's repeating them. And he said, well, 2005 just called, and it would like to explain to you how human beings can generate thousands of pages overnight that look like they're human generated because they weren't human generated, and et cetera, et cetera. If you've been in the SEO space for a long time, you well understand that scaled content is not a new type of thing. So we wanted to really stress Again, here's a quote. Here's a soundbite for you, Thomas. We don't really care how you're doing this scaled content, whether it's AI, automation, or human beings. It's going to be an issue. So those are things you should consider if you're wondering about the scaled content abuse policy and if you want to avoid being caught by it. That's interesting. He was asked, he offered an example that is of positive use of AI. Quote, when I go to Amazon, I skip down to the reviews, and the reviews have a little AI generated thing at the top that tells me what the users generally think. And I'm like, this is really helpful. And the thing that's really helpful to me about it is it's AI applied to original content, the reviews, to give me a summary. That was added value for me and unique value for me. I liked it. Quick disclaimer, just because Danny likes something that he sees on Amazon does not mean that's where the algorithm is going for Google. However, I agree with him. I actually really like that use on Amazon, and I use it frequently.
I think of a tie-in to that. I just discovered this week that the GPT-4o image generation that we talked about last week is really good at creating really awesome infographics. And you can literally feed in a whole blog post or some data or whatever, and it'll make you a pretty infographic that you can drop into your story. To me, that's the kind of use that he's hinting at, where you have something original and you wrote it or it's based on real world data, but then you use the AI to somehow supplement and improve it or to kind of summarize or pull something out of it. I think of transcripts, AI generated transcripts for an interview. Like, you do a podcast and maybe you pull up a transcript and that's helpful to users who want to skim through it and find the most relevant parts. That's the kind of stuff I can see them tolerating and elevating. The creating of content where the information itself is coming straight out of the AI, I think that's what he's really, you don't get much clearer than if you don't want to get caught up in it, caught by it was, I think his literal words. You better change if you're doing this. Google doesn't get too much more direct in their nebulous hinting than that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's interesting to hear him say, we don't really care how you do it. If you're doing it and you want to avoid being caught by it, pay attention. So, yeah, there it is. Like you said, straight from the horse's mouth, clear as day. So, it's interesting. These comments are coming out post March core update, but in a year where they're kind of trying to address this kind of stuff. So seems like subsequent updates will have more and more and more that pertain to this larger topic of scaled content abuse. So,
yeah, I mean, look at the pattern of site reputation abuse, right? They said, it's a problem, we don't like it. And for the longest time, nobody thought anything was going to happen. They said, we're going to fix it on this date. Nothing happened. Yeah. Then they did an update where they did little tweaks. This site lost some ranking, this site, and then all of a sudden, boom, everything that did that in their minds were lost overnight. And we covered that extensively, but some big names lost millions of dollars worth of traffic. So that's the pattern they follow. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see that this year.
Yeah, guy, was that just a year ago that we had the infamous May 5th, it's all, and then nothing happened from it. And then, but that was last year. And, you could say from the PR side of things, like last year, they pre-told us about all this stuff that was going to happen and didn't come to fruition, happened towards the end of the year. This year, they're probably like, why are we bothering telling them all this stuff? Just buckle up. We'll get it out there. We get it out there. But this is where we're going.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, let's talk about this third story today. There's a little bit of a different type of story than maybe the one that we've done in the past, or at least certainly so far. The story title is The Phony Comforts of AI Optimism, and it's by Ed Zitron. I think I'm saying his name right. We featured some of his stories on the podcast before. He always writes zingers. That's kind of what he does. And I don't know if this one's a little bit different. So we'll talk about it. It's about AI, about the future of AI. Thomas, you have a lot to say about that. But basically, in this article, Zitron is he's kind of critiquing the overly optimistic view, as he would say, of AI, particularly by journalists that he calls out here, maybe influencers. He kind of argues that their perspectives are often shallow. They're driven by bias, the desire to align with some sort of narrative, and they don't really address some of the issues that he says AI is facing. He also talks in the article about how despite improvements in AI benchmarks, a lot of these models, according to him, have serious flaws, hallucinations, they don't have real world experience, like going back to some of the stuff that we were just potentially theorizing on with Google. So he basically alludes or warns that the AI industry is essentially a bubble supported by speculative investment, media hype, and that there's not much evidence of profitability. So he kind of contrasts all this optimism with a healthy dose of skepticism here. Anyways, he kind of goes down this rabbit trail, but is arguing that when it comes to AI as an industry, its future as an industry, he'd say it's uncertain at best, and that there's a lot of optimism that doesn't necessarily have a lot of backing in terms of the data that is there to support it. Thomas, you're someone who kind of lives in this AI world. I mean, I'm trying to summarize a very long article. What are some sound bites? What are some clips? What are some things that you really got out of this that you wanted to discuss and address?
I think you have to separate here the industry and the business case within the industry from the technology itself. And I think that's something that I'm not seeing done so much in this article. It feels like this is saying, hey, there might not be a business case for AI, therefore being optimistic about the technology is wrong. And I just have to disagree with that completely. And I think, there's a lot in here about the profitability of data centers and AI companies. There's not a lot of data to back up the argument here that AI is all hype and not effective and not going to change things in substantial ways. And I think a lot of us in our own industry would look at an article like this that's basically saying, it's all hype, it's not really that big of a deal. And then we would look at the fact that if we hire a copywriter, 99% of the time, it's going to be somebody, who's using ChatGPT if we don't really do our homework and find somebody who's genuinely writing stuff. If any of us worked as copywriters or did that kind of work before, which, you're either using the tech now, or using AI, or you're competing with an army of people who are using it. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that radically change the kind of writing that you get on blogs, on platforms like Medium. If you go to social media these days, probably, 90% of what you see on Facebook is AI generated. A lot of people don't even realize it's AI generated. Head over to a lot of other social platforms, and if you know what you're looking for, you'll see how much of it is being created with AI. And then you move into any other industry. I mean, I talk to people who are outside of our space because I do a lot of AI consulting across different industries. And, accounting is being impacted by it. Doctors are telling me, hey, I don't need a medical scribe anymore because I'm using AI to take notes and to catalog what I'm doing so I don't have to, go back. I can spend more time with patients. It's changing things in so many different ways across so many different industries that the argument that the technology is hype and is not viable, I just can't buy into it. I totally disagree with it. And I've covered before, there's some data that shows, not a lot of companies are implementing AI. And people often point to that. I don't even think that he pointed to that, but there are credible cases to be made for, it's hype that's not being used. To me, that's because the companies don't necessarily even know how much their workers are using ChatGPT. They're using Gemini and Claude to get their work done. I mean, who goes to their boss and says, hey, I got that report done in 2 hours. It would have taken me all week. And then I watched Succession, or some kind of show like that on the couch for the rest of the week. That's not going to happen. People aren't going to admit to that. So I think it's changing industries in much more substantial ways than the data reflects. And again, I think he's saying, hey, there might not be a business case for some of these individual companies. Therefore, the tech is overhyped. I don't think that's true at all. The tech can be very viable, but different companies can succeed or fail based on how well they implement it, their timing, what kind of money they can raise. You look at the fact that the idea for the light bulb existed for a long time before Thomas Edison came and made it profitable. There's a lot of cases in history, if you look at sort of the history of science element of it, where people have discovered a new technology and lots of companies have tried and failed to commercialize it before somebody figures it out and comes along and makes a ton of money. It becomes this world-changing thing. Even the internet, it was around since the 60s in academic context. It was still the 90s. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for the tech.
It's interesting because this article dances amongst so many things that are happening. It almost feels like it's meant to go against the grain when it comes to what is a massive topic of interest in everybody's life these days, which is AI. because, it certainly touched, it certainly sparked something in you. And it's a long article, so you feel like at times he's kind of opposing himself in the article, or he's going back and forth. I mean, at one point, I'm reading out of the article. Side note, although this isn't a story about generative AI per se, we do need to talk about the benchmarks used to test AI performance. And so it's like, well, that kind of is about generative AI then, right? And so I do feel there's like a lot of dancing around. I mean, part of me feels like what you said is exactly spot on. Like, he's not really arguing about the AI. He's arguing about the business of the AI. And we do know those are two different things. We do see billions of dollars getting poured into the business behind AI versus the technology itself. And yet he does go back and kind of allude that he thinks in many ways there's unsustainability involved in the AI because of its flaws and because of its practices, he brings up these different articles about GPT 4.0, the most expensive general purpose LLM flunking 37% of questions. And I feel like you can always find these sources that are going to make AI look bad and these sources that will make AI look good. I think if you were to be in front of Ed right now and you only had 3 minutes with him, like, how would you choose to talk to him about this article? And what would be the biggest thing you'd want to bring up? Because it's long, it's involved, and it meanders a lot.
Yeah, I would want to see the data that he's using to argue that the tech itself is overhyped. Because that's, I mean, you at 201 Creative, you work with a ton of folks across multiple industries. What are you seeing on the ground? I mean, I'm seeing AI have big impacts across a lot of spaces, but what are you seeing from the folks you work with?
It depends. It straddles a lot. Like, it depends a lot. I think different industries are being impacted at far different rates. If you talk to a local business owner, it's funny. I was on a podcast earlier. And we were talking about a local business owner in the concrete space. Zero discussion about AI. And I've got local businesses that we work with week in and week out that doesn't even come up. And then obviously we're also in spaces where they're on the cutting edge of, I just released a case study a couple of weeks ago about how we helped this kind of online communication brand go from zero visibility to now, ranking page one for a lot of their, professional keywords that they want. And AI is a core part of their product and their service and their deliverable. So I see it really being, you have to understand the industry at this stage. But I don't know how much longer is that going to last? I mean, is the concrete guy going to have AI coming and getting involved in his job as well? I would say yes. I think it is coming. I think it's coming. It's just a matter of how involved it is for everything. I think your point too is very good. Like, a lot of businesses, AI is a bigger part than they know about it because maybe they're hiring someone to do their marketing and they're using AI. And so their marketing really is using more AI than they think. So I think that's a really good point also to bring up that might not make its way out into different studies and different data sets.
I think I'll sort of leave this one with, there was a study that looked at whether people are using AI at work. I think it was McKinsey. It was like a big consultancy that did this study. And when you ask people, do you use AI at work? About 60% of them now say yes, which doesn't seem groundbreaking, right? And then when you ask them what tools they use at work and you ask them how they use those tools in a lot of detail, and then you go and look at how many of those tools bake AI in, then it's 99% of people that are in some way using AI at work. And you think about somebody who goes and maybe they make an edit in Photoshop using some tool, like a generative fill. They don't even know that it's AI that's powering that. They just say, oh yeah, I went in Photoshop and I fixed it. And wow, it went a lot faster than it used to when I had to use the clone stamp and move stuff around and, masks and all that. They don't even realize. And in accounting, tools have this stuff baked in. So that's where I would take issue with this argument. I think people are using AI a lot more and for a lot more mundane stuff than this article acknowledges, and that frankly most people are even aware. Most people don't even know they're using it, but it's still making their work faster and better.
Well, it's a long one, folks. We'll include a link in the show notes. Pour yourself a large cup of coffee or, give yourself some time to read it through. It's a good read, though, and I think it's good to be up to date on that. I did have a feeling when I threw this one in the agenda, Thomas, that we'd get a nice hot take from you, which we like, you know. I miss having Spencer's hot takes on here sometimes. So it's good to get one out of you here. I agree with a lot of what you said. So,
hey everyone, Spencer here, founder of Niche Pursuits. Are you adding a new internal link pointing to each article you publish? You should be. Ever find it time-consuming and a bit overwhelming? Remembering what content you published and deciding which anchor text to use can be a real headache. What if there was a better way? Well, that's exactly why I created Link Whisper. Simply click Add Inbound Internal Links, and Link Whisper will scan your site in seconds and suggest the most relevant links with appropriate anchor text for your new article. Now simply check the box next to the internal links you want to add, and Link Whisper will add these links for you. No need to go into each article, edit, and add the link. It's already done. No more manual internal link building or guesswork. Just efficient, accurate linking that saves you time and improves your SEO. Transform your content strategy with Link Whisper. Start linking smarter, not harder. Use the coupon code PODCAST for $15 off. Head over to linkwhisper.com and use coupon code PODCAST to get $15 off.
Well, from that into side hustles, I don't know if our side hustles will be quite as spicy, but we can dive in nonetheless. I'll go first, and I'm going to be talking. We finished off... Sorry, I have something in my throat. We finished off the month of March, and so I'm going to discuss Amazon Influencer. It's been quite a roller coaster. Feel a bit like that Reddit volatility is happening over on the Amazon Influencer side of things. So I got to pull up my notes here. They're on a different screen. There we go. Okay. March came in just like February, just over $1,000. So definitely not where I want my earnings to be. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way and say that. February, I was pretty, I didn't stick to my goal of doing about 10 videos a week in February. Definitely took my foot off the gas. I got February's numbers back and I was like, February's always a slow or the slowest month of the year. And I say always because I've only been in the program a couple of years, but from talking to other people like you and others, everyone tends to agree. Like that's kind of one of the slowest points. It matches up with just kind of general e-com spending is at a low in Q1 anyways. And so February was kind of like one of those things, is it an anomaly and stuff. And so there's some interesting signs in the data. So March, I started publishing more videos. I published about 40 videos in March. So kind of got back on that. I think that did help because towards the second half of March, all my metrics started to improve. It's almost like the early part of March was performing even worse than February. And so I do think that some of that pullback was tied to me taking my foot off the gas just for a little bit, which is a shame because I was doing so good at being so consistent. And then February just, I got busy and frankly just kind of didn't want to make videos. And when you let yourself have that excuse, like I guess we're all human, but shame on me. So I think some of this was tied to that because I'm starting to see clicks, views, sales, conversions start to come through in increasing fashion in the second half of March. The data doesn't lie about that. At the same time, when I look back at last March, my conversion rate has dropped a lot. And that's the first time that's ever happened. And I'm very curious about that. Basically, my videos, my understanding of conversion rate, again, they don't tell us much, but my understanding of conversion rate is that it's based on the number of people that buy divided by the number of people that view the video. And I don't know why that would be because I haven't changed my videos dramatically. It's not like I've uploaded a lot of new videos and all of a sudden they aren't as helpful anymore. It's almost like the videos that were converting at this rate now aren't converting at that rate. Since I haven't changed anything about the videos, it just kind of speaks to some changes inside the program in terms of how they're measuring data or what counts as a sale now. And so I am curious about that. We don't have any information on what a sale is versus what a sale isn't. Is it 30 seconds and they buy? Is it? And so I am wondering if that might have changed as well, leading to a lower earnings based on some of these conversion metrics. So I've been talking for a while. That's the data. The good news is second half of March is on the way up. Even the first couple of days of April is on the way up. Spring is coming. I have a lot more spring products. So I am hopeful. I'm going to stick to doing 10 videos minimum a week. I'm going to do that throughout the month of April. I'm not going to back off on that, but some interesting reporting or changes in the way these whole things are working anyways.
Well, if it's any comfort, I pulled up my influencer numbers, and it's very similar to you. It's interesting. It's very similar patterns to what you're describing. So for others who are out there who are in the program, if you're seeing the same thing, we got at least 2 data points kind of backing this up. So my March was $1,053.
You and I
So
are
it sounds
spot
like
on the same.
pretty much, yeah, right on. I had very similar pattern to you. I tried to mirror your number of videos. I did a bunch of more in, I think, January when you were on that kick. I have fallen off, quite a bit on it. Been more focused on my AI newsletter. And interestingly, I think this is the most interesting part. My conversion rate has followed the same pattern as yours. So I'm at half. It looks like
half,
maybe 60% of where I was last year.
Yep.
I haven't changed anything. So if you're seeing that and I'm seeing that, it's got to be some kind of change in how they're measuring it or something. I don't know, something in the program.
The beauty about not telling us how they measure it is that they can change it, not tell us how they changed it. And for the record, folks, I don't know if that's what they did, but I have a data science background, so that's kind of what the math looks like. And then you're seeing the same thing, so it's interesting. So, I've had a couple people be like, "Oh, so is that it? You're done with the program?" Like, no, we've had lulls before. We've had data get lost before. We've had them pull all of our videos off the carousels before with no warning. Like, I'm not giving up on it in any way, shape, or form. I still think that the ROI is still great. The ROI on 10 videos a week making $1,000 a month isn't great, but it's March and I don't sell much in March normally. Now, if this trend continues for a while, that would be when you got to kind of start to look and say, okay, we've been through a couple seasons here. We've been through a couple of different, e-com cycles where normally spending is high. And so we'll continue to evaluate it, but at least I'm not coming in going like, yeah, and I see no signs of this changing. It does look like we're going to hopefully start to see some improvement. We'll see if that continues.
Yeah, I mean, March and February, March is starting to get into the spring season. There's gardening stuff selling. People are buying stuff for the backyard. Nobody's buying anything in February unless you do a ton of Valentine's Day content. It's like nobody's buying gifts around like they do around the holidays. People aren't really doing hobbies. It's just cold and dark and miserable, and people are indoors being sad. And then you get into March and people start to redo their yard. They plant the garden. They start up with their hobbies. They kind of, start to cook more. And it's just, it's a more hopeful time of year and people start buying stuff again. So it's a very seasonal pattern. And I'm seeing the exact same thing you are. And I'm sure other folks out there, if it's your first time doing this, it might be really scary to see that drop, especially if you joined the program maybe in October or November of last year. And you're like, okay, I'm at half the revenue I was around November. Is this thing dying? I don't think it is. I think, like you said, it's not time to stop. Maybe it's time to start making some spring content videos.
That is what I was thinking about doing. I was telling my wife over the weekend, time to get out all the spring stuff, maybe a couple weeks earlier than we normally would. But, that's what I do during Christmas time. We start doing Christmas in September around here. So we get all that stuff out there, same thinking. So, okay, over to you for your side hustle update.
So this week I'm sharing an update on Medium, kind of similar to you. I have months worth of data from March, and there have definitely been some changes on Medium. I alluded to it earlier that I think they felt the full impact of AI content kind of flooding onto the platform. I kind of covered this, I think, in my last update earlier this year about Medium, that they responded to that by really leaning into the human curation part of the platform. And I've seen that continue. And I mentioned before, I really tried to alter my strategy to match that change. And I think it's gone pretty well so far. So in March, I am at $1,703 of earnings on Medium. And that is so this is sort of get into the strategy. I had 2 stories that got boosted. If you're aware of the Medium platform, that's when Medium's own curation team decides a story is really good and decides to give it this boost where it'll go out to typically about 10 times more people on Medium, and it'll typically earn about 10 times more than a story that doesn't get boosted. So it's like they pour some jet fuel on your story manually, completely manually, if they think it's really good. I got 2 stories boosted in March. I also got one boosted on February 28th, which is basically, the earnings are going to come in March. So that's where I think a lot of the earnings have come from. But I also made some other changes. I started publishing a lot more. So in March, I did 8 stories versus back in January, for example, I only did 3. So I really ramped up the amount of content that I'm publishing on the platform. I get into why that is. But I've also been using their new featured stories system. So this is where if you have a publication on Medium or you write for a publication, publish your stories there, the editor there or yourself, if you're the editor, can feature a certain number of stories. It's, I think, 4 per month per publication. And that gives them an intermediate boost. It's not the 10x that you get with something that's boosted, but it gets spread more to that platform's followers, or that publication's followers, rather. There's like push notifications now that come up in the Medium app if you follow a publication and a story gets featured in there, that kind of stuff. So between the publishing more, getting stories boosted, which again has been my strategy, and then this featured stories thing, I'm pretty comfortable with that. $1,703 I feel good about.
Is that an increase from previous months? I mean, just to put it in perspective, like you've kind of taken this new tack. Not that you have to go through your entire lineup of how much you've made on Medium, but I know we haven't gotten a Medium update from you in a while. So how does that compare to like some previous months?
That's a great question. Yeah, I'm looking back. February, my earnings were definitely down. It was about $807, it looks like, in here. January was still pretty decent, around $1,200. I had a couple really solid months last year where I got a ton of stuff boosted, and they hadn't made these kind of bigger changes that I think we've seen on the platform, where I was making over 4,000 in some months, but that was more of an aberration. I would say, my typical is between like maybe 1,000 and 3,000. So I'm really comfortably on the middle to high end of that for the last month. But yeah, at the beginning of the year, like February, I was definitely down. So I think it's been a positive change. And I think that kind of embracing that new strategy, again, with boosted articles and featured articles as the focus, has definitely been working.
I mean, I realize it's impossible with these kind of questions. As a podcast host, I know people hate getting asked this, but like, we did a big interview of you back in August, September on Medium. I know I did a lot of work on Medium in Q3 and Q4. A bit like your Amazon influencer thing, I have not done much in this year, 2025. Like, if you could just summarize in 20 or 30 seconds, like, what's this different approach, especially for people who maybe listened to your interview a year ago, 9 months ago, whatever it is, and now are trying to understand the difference?
Before the influx of AI content, if you published a really solid story on Medium, it would sort of naturally bubble its way to the surface. You didn't have to work as hard to kind of get it pushed up there. And yeah, they've experimented with all different ways of manually elevating stories over the years. But fundamentally, if you wrote a really good story, it would find its audience. There's so much noise now to the signal that I think that, and this is all based on sort of just observation of data. I don't have a line into Medium to know exactly what's happening, but it seems like they've been inundated with AI content like everybody else. And so it's a lot harder to rely on those great stories being elevated by the platform's own algorithm, because there's just so much noise. There's just thousands of AI generated stories being published on there all the time. And so even if something's great, it kind of gets buried. So what they've done is, again, leaned into these manual curation steps, leaning on human editors of publications to kind of flag stuff as good, and that's the featured, leaning on people like me who are boost curators to nominate and show articles that we think are exemplary, and then Medium's own team manually reads those and decides whether to give it a boost. So they are really going full human, in terms of their approach to AI. So I would say the big difference from the interview last year is that before, if you published something great, it would pretty much just find its own audience. Now you have to publish something great, and you have to somehow get it in front of a human gatekeeper, essentially, who will decide that it's something that should be elevated.
Okay.
And that's either through featured or boosted. And it changes the strategy a little bit. You can't be quite as passive. Before, it was really like you published it and you just collected money. Now you have to be an advocate for your own story, and you really have to be pushing it. You have to be finding the publication that can feature it or the one that can nominate it. And if you can do that, the earnings are, if anything, even better. I mean, I'd say I'm spending less time writing on Medium. These aren't stories that take me 10 hours like my boosted ones did before. And the payoff is really solid, but it's a lot more hands-on than it used to be.
Got it. Okay. That's a good update. All right. Maybe I should publish some more on Medium. I'll have to think about it.
Yeah, and I would say all of this, like I'm highlighting the partner program earnings because that's what I think most people are interested in, like new revenue source, diversification, that kind of stuff. If your strategy, which I still think is the best strategy, is lead gen for your own business or getting people to a newsletter, much less has changed on the platform. Like it still works better if you get boosted or featured for those kinds of things, but you can still very readily, if you have a good audience on the platform, get newsletter, subscribers and all the other stuff that you can do, affiliate marketing, SEO. Google still loves Medium content, loves to put it at the top of the SERPs. This really applies to partner program. The final thing I would say, one of the reasons that it's taking me less time, I know as you've tried in the past, taking a lot of the stories I've been writing for my AI newsletter, the AI in Real Life, and reworking them to be Medium articles. And it still takes time. It's not a one-to-one. I can't just publish a newsletter there. But since I've already kind of come up with the kernel of the idea and explored it in writing the newsletter, it's so much easier to write a longer form Medium story from it. And that has cut down my time. And honestly, I think my stories are better than they were before I was really like writing for my audience.
And that's how I always had looked to use Medium. I've never, well, I shouldn't say that. I've done it a couple of times just more as an experiment, but outside of that experiment, I don't sit down to write an article for Medium. I'll take my newsletter and to your point, like I'll tweak it, I'll modify it because the way you send an email, the way you publish on Medium, I'm not an expert, but I have found, there's some nuance, there's some differences, but you already have that idea. You've already marinated on that idea. You've already put it into some sort of form. And that's where I think Medium can still be, it sounds like very powerful for bloggers and content creators. It's kind of the same topic as we've always talked about. Like if you have a blog post and it does very well, why wouldn't you want to make a YouTube video about it? But you can't just read the blog post. You have to do something a little bit different, but it's still that core concept. It gets traffic for the blog post. There's people interested in it. How do you cater that now for a YouTube audience? It's a bit like, how do you now cater something that you're writing for the Medium audience?
I think people should always triple dip if they can, right? So I'll write something for the newsletter. And as I mentioned last week, now I'll try to do a YouTube video that ties into that topic. Suddenly that's looking like that could be a viable monetized channel. It's not there yet, but I'm hoping that it will be. So I can get Beehive ads. I could get the potentially YouTube revenue from it. And then if I rework it for Medium, I can get Medium Partner Program. Maybe I throw a sponsor in there sometime down the line. And, it's maybe less per story than it could have been in the past on all those platforms or per video. But in the aggregate, when you triple dip like that, it can work out super well.
And each of them point back to your newsletter, sign up so that they can get future ones. And so you can double down on those kind of aspects as well.
Yeah, and to me, that's when we've all been saying build a brand, right? That's the response that everyone in the industry has. That's what it actually looks like on the ground, right? Like creating multiple places that you're publishing, multiple formats, they all interlink and tie together. To me, that's what the brand ultimately is. And yeah, I would encourage people to do that with their blog too. I mean, be monetized in multiple ways, have affiliate, have advertising, get sponsors, tie into a newsletter, connect that to a YouTube channel, build a Facebook page. Like that's the new model. And to me, that's like where the rubber meets the road when we talk about building a brand. It's when you have all these interlocking channels that reinforce each other. They're all monetized in different ways. You're diversified. You're not reliant on one company like Reddit and Google. That's where we all should seek to be.
Do all the things. Challenging, but, probably also still something worth figuring out. So, okay. Well, hey, it's Weird Niche time. Mine sent me on a little bit of a rabbit trail, which is kind of interesting. Let me go ahead and pull mine up. Let's see here. Sorry. There's so many screens today. There we go. Okay. Whoops. Nope. Not that one. See, I've got a Wikipedia page to share. Let me put it that way. But first, the Weird Niche. The Weird Niche site is postsecret.com. Now, many people might be familiar with this website because it has been around for quite a while. And basically, what it is a screenshot. It's a very simple website. It's a screenshot. And so I'll go ahead and read it aloud. It's basically, it says, share a secret. And it's a screenshot of like basically a postcard, the back of a postcard. It says, you're invited to anonymously contribute a secret to a group art project. Your secret can be a regret, fear, betrayal, desire, confession, humiliation. Reveal anything as long as it is true and you have never shared it with anyone before. Steps. Number 1, take a postcard or 2. Number 2, tell your secret anonymously. Number 3, stamp and mail the postcard. And he's got his address here in Laguna Niguel, California. And so basically he gets a large volume of these. Let me go ahead and read from the Wikipedia side of things to give you a little bit more background, and then we'll kind of go through some of them. It was created by Frank Warren in 2004. And at one point he's gotten, let's see, in the first couple of years, he got over 2,500 original pieces of, again, they're calling it art, from people across the United States and around the world between 2005 and 2007. Started as an experiment on Blogger, and it was updated every Sunday with 10 new secrets, all of which share a relatively constant style. And then let's see here. There was a comment section that was enabled. It accidentally got pulled down by Blogger. It's obviously now on its own website. According to Youth Trends February 2008 top 10 list report, PostSecret was the 10th most popular site among female students in the U.S., with 7% of those polled naming it as their favorite. In 2011, it was announced that an app would be developed. It was subsequently shut down because it was, kind of got spammed and sort of things. So this guy basically has gone on, though, to host events at numerous colleges to speak about the different secrets of today's society. An art exhibition exists. He has written, according to his Wikipedia page, 6 books. He released his first one in 2005, so right after this thing got published, and his most recent one is apparently 2014. So this is a highly popular site. Now, I'm going to have to skip them because when I put this together, I'm going to have to skip a few just to be, kind of stick with the theme of the podcast here. But, when I was looking at them from last Sundays as I was preparing, some of them were not as bad, but he's got at the bottom classic secrets, and I think these are kind of some of the ones that are representative of what people are writing in. So here's a postcard of a picture. It says, "You were right all alone. I never loved you. I'm leaving tonight." Here's one of a kind of a painting of a sailboat in the storm, and it says, "I got arrested the other night. It wasn't very exciting." I kind of like this one. It's like this kind of drawing of an engagement ring, and it's like a Post-it note stuck to it. It says, "Every time I take garbage to a dumpster, I'm always afraid my ring will slide off my finger and end up in the dumpster, and I'll have to jump in to find it." And so there's just a lot of stuff on here. Some of it, very touching, some of it very serious, some of it very funny. I'll just go ahead and share the Ahrefs on here so you guys can see that. And then, Thomas, I want to hear your thoughts on this very bizarre, but very popular and very successful weird niche site. It is a DR71. It's got over 167,000 backlinks. It only gets about 22 to 23,000 organic visits a month, although it does get a lot of other forms of traffic. So, wow. So Thomas, what do you think of this? I mean, it's an art project. You're an artist. You're a photographer. Like, what do you think of this?
I distinctly remember sitting in Borders, which should give you a sense of the timeline here, and reading that original book. It was probably like 2006 or something. Mm-hmm. And yeah, when he made this into a printed book, and you could go through and look at them, and this is a blast from the past. And so was your weird niche last week. You brought me back to some bands I hadn't remembered listening to as a adolescent. So yeah, this is awesome. I'm so glad to see it still exists.
It does,
that's
right?
The super cool thing. Like 20 years later, this is what this guy has done with his life. And I mean, yeah, all of us should be so lucky to have a concept that works so well that you do it for your entire career. It seems to be his thing. 6 books. I mean, great job to him. So yeah, it's definitely a blast from the past. But I think this idea of raw, kind of human created content, it's almost coming back into vogue. Like I saw a little bump in his traffic at the end of that very long graph in Ahrefs. And I think it's like, yeah, this idea of sort of raw human stuff is coming back in. And so this feels like something that was relevant 20 years ago and is now like Reddit on a page.
Okay, so you just took the words right out of my mouth. I'm like, there's such a Reddit vibe to like what's happening with the concept here. And it's almost like he was before his time. Actually, I don't even know when Reddit was created, to be honest with you. I probably shouldn't say that, but it feels like Reddit came about 10 years ago, really got prominence in the last decade or so. But this feels like it has such a very Reddit vibe and culture going for it. And it really is like this type of stuff this concept feels, it's very real, raw, personal, can't be mimicked by AI type of feel is so present right now.
I think we all laughed at Google when one of their pieces of advice for improving your SEO was to hand out business cards, right? Like that was something we all kind of mocked. But the idea of doing something in the physical world and improving your brand in that way, I still feel like there's a lot to that. And this is a great example where it sounds like they tried to launch an app. And if you could submit this stuff kind of anonymously on the internet, it got spammed. This was before AI. You can imagine what it'd be like now. But if you make people physically write it out and send it in on a postcard, that changes the dynamic and changes what people are sending in. I've even experimented with that for my own site where I've sent businesses a plaque if I feature them, a literal wooden laser cut plaque that has their business name and my web address and says, featured as the best, whatever. And people hang them up on the wall in their restaurant because it's different. It's not like another email saying, hey, we covered you, will you give us a backlink, etc. So I think there's something to this idea of stuff in the physical world, and is a perfect example of it.
Fun concept. And you can lose yourself there for a while. Although it's really 10 secrets a week. It's kind of talk about scarcity. You got to see them for that week or else they're kind of gone. Okay. Well, I kind of teased yours at the outset. If you've hung around this long, you're wondering what is Thomas's weird niche site and why is it relevant? I'll go ahead and share it on screen here.
So we've shared a lot about different animal-related sites in a lot of different areas. We shared about goat rental in the past.
That's right.
That was one of the early weird niches. But egg prices have been skyrocketing. There's egg shortages, and people are wondering what to do about it. And obviously, the simplest way to solve that for your own family is to rent a bespoke chicken coop loaded up with chickens and start to hatch your own eggs in your backyard. And that's the concept for this. This is rentthechicken.com. And it's basically, the best way I can describe it is a high-end chicken rental service. And they basically will pair you, it seems like it's more of a directory site. They will pair you with local companies where you can rent for the summer a chicken coop with chickens, and they will bring it to your backyard and set it up. And then you can have the fun of basically raising your own backyard chicken flock and getting the eggs that come out of that. And then at the end of the season, they'll come back and take it back and, and bring it back to somebody else the next year. They charge a lot. I was looking at some of the options. It's maybe $800 for the season for a couple months to have this chicken coop. It does include everything. So they have books that they give you all the feed for your chickens. It is a bespoke backyard chicken coop rental service.
This is crazy. Oh, it's not on screen. No wonder. Okay, sorry. It opened in a new window, which is not shared. I have Los Angeles up. So if you're in the Los Angeles area, they partner you up with Hatch the Chicken. And this one's very affordable, Thomas, $225. And you only get a 5-week indoor rental. And you're right. It gives you everything, though. You can just pay right here and then call them and schedule your delivery.
So I have 10 chickens currently. And I've featured a backyard chicken website before. Got 10 chickens. I actually am sitting next to a chicken incubator.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you were sitting next to your chicken.
No, I thought about bringing a chicken for this segment, but I didn't think I could keep them quiet for the whole thing. Maybe next time. But I have 16 eggs in an incubator next to me on my desk that'll hatch in about, maybe 2 more weeks. So I have definitely bought into the backyard chicken craze. They're awesome animals to have. You do indeed get a ton of eggs. You will not save any money because it costs a fortune to just feed them and take care of them and everything. But it is a great hobby. And I think this is great. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of people And I think there's data showing that tons of people in response to egg shortages have gotten curious about like where do my eggs come from, and wanted to start a backyard flock. And this is like a turnkey solution. So I love that they've taken this need that people have and made what looks like a super viable business out of it.
Well, and look here, USA, for farm fresh chicken snacks, visit Grubly Farms, and I can see a Genius link down there. Tells me that they're getting an affiliate commission on that. If you're in Canada, try Tricycle. I don't think they're getting commission on that, though. Maybe they are. Let me pull up the Ahrefs here for you, and you can talk through how they're doing in terms of ranking. I agree with you, though. Rankings aside, I mean, the price of eggs is all the rage right now in terms of, being in the news. Oh, man, I shared the wrong screen. I'm so sorry, guys.
That's fine. I mean, just to summarize a little, it was like a DR46. When I looked at it, as you can imagine, it doesn't get a ton of traffic. Yeah, there you go. Not a lot of traffic, but really pretty solid domain authority. And a lot of the traffic they do get is branded, it appears, or is sort of, they're like an exact match. So rent a chicken, rent chickens, rent the chicken, which is probably a branded one. Chicken rental. How much does it cost to rent a chicken? Rent a coop. So I think they are really doing a pretty good job. And it looks like a lot of it is people looking for stuff near them, because I'm seeing that the actual URL that ends up ranking corresponds to the most populous cities or areas where people might be looking to rent. So like New York and Los Angeles, the pages for renting a chicken in those places come up as the main topic for things like rent a coop. So it seems like they're getting good search traffic tied to local search. And I can imagine that must be pretty profitable. If you're looking to rent a chicken, they seem to be the place to do it.
It's so interesting. I mean, I was noticing on their map there, Thomas, they didn't really have anything for the Bay Area. So maybe you want to start a chicken rental business. I'm just saying, you could partner up with them and let them know that you're available to rent out your 10 chickens. You might need to expand a little bit more if you want to make it into a viable side hustle. But yeah, I don't know. Summer's coming.
Well, if all 16 of these end up hatching, I'm going to have 26 chickens. I'm going to have to do something with them. So
there you go.
Yeah, maybe that'll be my next side hustle to share here. At the very least, there's going to be some chicken content in my newsletter and on my YouTube channel.
I just did an interview with someone where we interviewed them. It'll come out in the next couple weeks, maybe a month. And it's not an online side hustle. It's not an online business. It is a real in the wild business that I think a lot of people will be intrigued by, though. It's not a chicken rental business, though. Be interesting. That's fun.
Well, if you want me to bring a chicken to the next interview, please do let me know in the comments. I do read all the comments. And if you've made it this far and you comment that, then congrats. You're one of our most loyal listeners.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll oblige and bring one of them along.
For the people that comment on the weird niches or email in, I'm always thinking to myself, I'm like, did they listen to the whole thing, or they like the weird niches? They immediately skip to that in the YouTube and they ignore all of our stuff in the news. So I never know, but we do get, that's probably where most of the emails from this segment from the Friday news podcast, that's what they come in with, is comments on the weird niches. They're always fun. They're always inspiring. So, well, hey, with that, we can bring this week in Niche Pursuits news to a close. Thank you again, as always, for sticking around with us. We hope you have a great rest of your week and weekend. We'll see you again back here as we talk about the news for next week. Have a good one, everyone.